everybody. This is Barry Johnson. Welcome back to another edition of Studio Talk. Lately, I've been listening to some memoirs of some famous old school rock stars, and I've learned a few lessons along the way, and I'm going to share them with you. Let's get to it. All right. So, what memoirs have I been reading? The first one I started was Peter Frampton. I'm a huge Frampton fan. Frampton Comes Alive was hugely inspirational for me back in the 70s and 80s. He's a highly underrated historically guitar player. I think today he gets his credits for his chops, but back then he got turned into a little teeny bopper because he was a good looking guy like me. Okay, so anyway, I read his memoir. He started in the 60s, as did everybody I'm going to talk about today. The three that I've gone through so far, all started from the 60s and through the 70s. Okay, the next one up was Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones. Now, that was a fascinating read. Fascinating. And then I'm about ready to finish up. We got about an hour left, I think, of Greg Allman of the Allman Brothers memoir. And all these folks were so influential. And let's face it, in music, in modern recording history, there was probably no decade more exciting than the 70s. Okay. Now, the 70s didn't have much going for it in general, but when it came to rock music, okay, that's when things got crazy, got wild, and was really all about excess of writing songs, excess of drugs, sex, and rock and roll, and all of that stuff. And I find it very interesting to hear how these guys navigated through all of that and ultimately end up having a career that lasted all these years. Most of these guys, minimum 50 years plus. Okay. That's pretty impressive. Now, one thing that Keith Richards said in his memoir that I thought was it really deserved breaking it down and thinking about it, okay? And with today's music, oftentimes, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to insult you if you're a big fan of today's music. I'm not for the most part, okay? I think it's gotten way too generic. Now, there's exceptions to this, and there are artists today that I do really like, but I think we've gotten too generic, too click tracky, too to the grid, too very blah, blah, blah. There's really no songs. Well, I'm not going to say none. I would say most of popular, what's on the charts as far as modern music, and I'm going to take this across most genres, has gotten quite boring. And yes, there are some diamonds in the rough, and there's some great things out there, but for the most part, it's not so great. Okay. And so that made me wonder. And one of the things that, although it's a simple phrase, it's really, really deep, in my opinion, once you really, really think about it. And basically, what Keith said was, it's all about the song. I'm a guitar player. It's not about me as a guitar player. It's not about what I can do. Maybe someone else wrote it. Who cares? It's all about the song. Never lose focus, whether you're playing in a band or whether you're writing a song. Remember, everything you do is about the song and nothing but the song. Now, next, and here's one where I think most people make mistakes, it's all about the sound. Capturing something that sound of that song, that fits that song, that molds it like a glove, that just makes it just right. I don't know about you, but many times in my journey, I have sat down, trying to write songs, even when I'm inspired and they just come naturally to me. I find that at some point, I start forcing it to do things, or I find myself I really like it so much, I just want to get to the end result. So maybe I take a generic approach to it. God forbid, copy and paste. Yes, I've done it. I'm sorry. But to get the idea down, and then oftentimes with the way I work, I start hearing the song like that, and I stop hearing it the way I originally heard it. Okay. So stay focused when you're creating this music, you're writing it, whether you're the person who wrote it, whether you happen to be playing an instrument on it, whether you happen to be engineering it, or whether you happen to be producing it. And maybe for many of us, you're doing all of that. Okay. always stay focused on the song because that was a common thread. One thing that became very evidently clear to me throughout this process of going through all three of these memoirs, who all had three completely differently distinctive styles of music, completely, no question about it, but all unique. Okay. And they all stood out in their time and they've all stood the test of time. And every one of them talk about the fact that it's woodshedding. They all sucked at writing songs for several years in the beginning. They couldn't put together a decent song, and then slowly but surely they started figuring out, I'm not going to say a formula, I'm going to say a style of creating that best suit theirs. Like for somebody like me, as an example, it's either going to come to me naturally or I need to not waste my time with it. I have learned that, and I've wasted too much time trying to make a song turn into something. Okay. And so this woodshedding thing where you just keep practicing and practicing and practicing, and then you realize, hey, I've got the potential for a great song here. Don't stop there. What's the sound of that going to be like? What's the vibe? What's the overall feel going to be like? What are you going for? Because that has to affect how you record it, how you arrange it, and what everything else you do during the process. So think about the song, think about the sound, but don't try to create other people's music. I guess that's one thing. That's one definite takeaway from this if you haven't figured it out already, okay? If you're out there and you've got your favorite artist that you like and you've got your favorite, genre that you like, okay? Don't get sucked into the mistake that so many people make is they try to just copy that style, copy that singing style, copy that production style, copy, copy, copy. I hate to break it to you, but there's zero originality in copy. That doesn't mean you can't learn from all these things and maybe take different approaches and apply them differently and do different things. Of course you can. You should always be expanding your knowledge. But that's a technical thing. I'm talking about the mood, the inspiration, the emotion, the thing that makes a song move us. It's not all of those things, right? Oftentimes the best songs are the most simplest, okay? Or the simplest, right? Oftentimes it's very simple melody. There's not a lot of production in it. Many, many times songs are like this, but we get so hung up at overdoing it. Too many tracks, too many instruments, too many this, too many that. And all of a sudden it's a big wash of mess, okay? So when you're doing it, make sure that you're focused on the song first and then focus on the sound. What do I want this to sound like? How do I make it? And if you can't get it and you're not able to produce that sound, in other words, you're not able to play it or you're not able to do that, but you're convinced that that song is good, that's the time you need to start getting some other people involved in your project and quit trying to do everything yourself. Collaboration is another thing that I learned from those memoirs. Collaboration is key. There are some people who can only write by themselves, okay? And there are some people who write very well with other people. I think you need to explore that from a writing standpoint, but from a playing standpoint, we all develop our own individual style. And oftentimes we find ourselves in a little, conforming to what we know and what we're comfortable with. Well, oftentimes you may not be able to get the vibe that you're looking for with your playing. I may not be able to get it with mine. So that's when I want to get somebody else in there to bring a different perspective, a different idea, a different set of ears, so they can add something to it that I can't. We have gotten away from musicians being highly skilled musicians being understood as highly critical to creating great music. But no, today everything's one at a time. Rarely can you ever see a band going into a studio and all tracking at the same time. Why? Because they're frankly not good enough to do it. It has nothing to do with sonic. Some of the best recordings ever made was everybody in a room together. Now you've got to think about how you do that, obviously. But still, okay, the bottom line is very few bands these days can actually play a song from start to finish in a recording environment. Now that's pretty sad and it's pretty disappointing, all right? And so what are you working for? What are you trying to do? Okay? Hone your craft, hone your skill, get good at these things. But more importantly, be focused on the song, be focused on the sound. Then you have a chance of getting a good end result song that will hopefully move people the way that moved you when you were writing it, all right? So I encourage you, get out there, find some folks that you like. But I encourage you when you're looking into memoirs, okay, and you're thinking about who you're going to read. Now, I say read, but I'm a big audiobook guy, so I do mine on audiobook. I've got an hour commute back and forth to work every day. So I get my entertainment from my audiobook. So that's how I quote unquote read. I don't have the attention span to read, but when I'm in a captive space like a car, I can pay attention all day long. Okay. So try to go back far. I think you can learn lessons by going further and back in time. Now, the furthest you can really go back to is, quite honestly, and have it be meaningful to you, is the 60s. Okay. You got so many great bands that came out of the 60s, but pick somebody who moved you, somebody inspired you, somebody who wrote and performed in ways that you like, and go check those out. I can promise you, you'll find some interesting stuff in that read. It's just not telling about all their stories on the road. You get to hear everything in these. I had a different impression of memoirs before I started, for reading them slash listening to them, however you want to look at it. Now it's completely changed. But I can tell you, I don't really have a desire to pull up a memoir from somebody that was an artist in the 80s or 90s. Why? I lived through those times. I understand those times. Okay. I want to go back to the core, where it all started, where it was blossoming, where it was maturing. How did we get to this point? Well, you go back to the foundation, and that's where it all started. Whether or not you liked that music back then doesn't really matter. It was the music of the time, and it was a creativity of the time. And you also get a lot of lessons along the way about some things you should do and definitely some things that you should not do. One common thread amongst all three of these guys is they were all heavily into drugs and alcohol. Probably want to stay away from that. Not completely if you don't want to, but don't get crazy with that stuff, man, because it's gonna drag you down. So, all righty now, we're at the end of this thing. If you like the things I talk about on this channel, I ask you do me a favor. Hit that like button, that subscribe button, and that notification bell so you know when I got a new video. I really appreciate that. I work hard to put this content out, you folks, and I hope you like it. Got a bunch of other videos. Go back and watch them. Got a lot of things. Most of my videos are meant to be kind of timeless. They'll be relevant no matter when you watch them for the most part. Some, of course, are not. Like I do a review. Well, I guess that's timeless to a degree, depending on what it is, but still, whatever, okay? So go check out some of my other videos. But until next time, oh, don't forget to leave some comments below. But until next time, I hope y'all have a thoroughly enjoyable, great song, great sound vibe in your recordings day. Bye-bye.